All right. Mark, see all the participants flowing in on your side. It means we're live, ready to rock.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today for another podcast, Between Two Coasts with Mark Pugh and I. And we've got some amazing guests today. We got Lisa Haug and Chiquita Mann joining us. I'm going to, as always, kind of do our normal routine here and start our little jingle from Bob here. Let's see here. I moved my screen.
As always, thanks, Bob.
Yes, thank you, Bob.
And each time Tim plays it, it's like the first time he's ever done it.
You know what's funny is it disappears on my end. Actually, I have it up on my screen and I can't share it right now. So we may have to skip over that for right now. It's on this.
We're not going to sing it, so we'll just move forward.
Perfect. Let's go ahead and do that. Well, I wanted to play the jingle. I'm sitting here looking at it on my screen and it's not giving me the option to share it, so I don't know what's going on. I'm Tim Bennock with QLI.
And I'm Mark Pugh with Preferred Medical, and we are Between
Two Coasts. See, we're getting better. We're getting pretty good at that.
Okay.
Oh, you guys are pretty good at that.
Not even close.
Welcome to episode 6. As the description says, we're trying to replicate virtual what we've done in person. If you've joined us in the past for one of these, you know our goal with this, and we were actually just talking about this a year ago. Today is when the CDC declared this a pandemic. And so this is kind of when all of our worlds changed, and especially in the conference world, which is what we're trying to replicate here. We haven't all been able to get together and hang out on the conference floor in a hallway or a coffee shop. And so the goal of this podcast is to replicate those conversations that happen in passing and you know, touch and get together and figure out how everyone's life is going and what's new. And we do like to pick a theme for that, just to be engaged and so that we kind of keep on track, because I feel like we could talk for about 4 hours since it's been so long since we've been together. So today's theme is going to be medical management. And as always, we do hope that you use the chat feature, the question and answer. Let's make this like you guys are also on the conference floor in the hallway with us, and join in on the conversation. So Mark, with that, I'll go ahead and pass the mic over to you.
Absolutely. We're really happy to have with us today Chiquita Mann, who is a nurse case manager with Paradigm's Complex Care Department, and Lisa Haug, who manages case managers for Safety National. Both of them are nurses. Both of them have been on the front line in kind of different capacities during COVID, and they're going to share their thoughts on everything they've learned over the past year and what that may mean for the future, because there were some things that they had to do from a medical management standpoint that are probably going to end up being temporary, but there are other things that they learned that are going to be incorporated into their standard practice going forward. But before that, as always, we'd like to kind of have them share one thing that most people don't know about them. So Chiquita, if you can share with the audience something that maybe they don't know about you yet.
I am an avid Mortal Kombat fan.
Whoa,
That's awesome.
didn't see that one coming.
I didn't either. This is a good time for you since they just released that new preview, right, for the new movie coming up.
You know what? I am planning actually a vision party for my whole family, and that's a lot of people.
Amazing.
But we're gonna watch Mortal Kombat together, so I'm excited.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Okay, Lisa, top that.
Well, before Lisa goes,
I don't have anything unique on there.
We got to figure out what Chiquita's favorite character is, or who her favorite.
Yeah, what is her favorite? Who is her favorite character?
All I'm gonna say is this: get over here.
Yeah, there it is, Scorpion, baby. I love it.
Well, I guess what's unique about me, I come from a very large family. I'm one of 7, the oldest of 7, I should say. So that makes it unique. And during COVID, we all tried to, keep our distance, but at the same time, stay connected. And I became avid into kickboxing. So that's a good thing. Maybe that's something extra.
Mortal Kombat, kickboxing. It's kind of the same theme. I like it.
It's a good thing this is Zoom. This could get ugly really quick.
That's awesome. Well, thank you both for sharing that. It always is nice to kind of break the ice a little bit and let everyone that maybe is tuning in that doesn't know you to know a little bit something personal about you, so the next time they do see you in person, which is hopefully the latter part of this year. It's a good conversation starter. So, and obviously, COVID impacted your ability to directly engage with injured workers and their treatment providers. In the case of catastrophic injury, the inability to build a personal rapport with the injured worker, the providers, and especially the family has required a different approach. Chiquita, if you could tell us what you did before COVID, how you adjusted during COVID, and how that might impact how you handle those situations going forward.
I would have to say, being in the field, one of the things that we used to do, I would say 50% of what we did was we would actually go out to hospitals to be able to visit the patient. And so once COVID hit, we were not able to actually go into the hospitals anymore to be able to visit the client, which I have to admit was a major part of us developing rapport with the injured worker and with the families, especially if the injury was very traumatic, so to speak. They would be able to have someone face to face that can kind of help to allay, their concerns and address their concerns. And I have to admit that that was a big adjustment for us, because usually hospitals wouldn't really talk to us over the phone. So they had to talk to us over the phone, or else sometimes they wouldn't be able to get the information that they needed for billing. So that was one of the main ways that we know, like, immediately. It's like once the hospital shut down, you could not get in at all.
Was there an immediate pivot? Was it phone right away? Was it Zoom right away? Were people open to kind of a new way of interacting? What roadblocks did you run into right away?
I would definitely have to say being creative and trying to find a way to express empathy and concern, and not just the family thinking, okay, this is somebody else that I got to talk to. Sure. You had to find a way for them to be able to see that there was a benefit for them to take your call, a benefit for them to, they didn't speak with anybody else. It's a benefit to speak to me, the case manager, because I can be able to help you through this process. And, let's face it, when you're in an unknown situation, I love workers' comp, but for most people, workers' comp is like, it is the foreign land. I mean, we know nothing about it. Being able to have someone who knows the process, someone who can help me understand what is going on with my family, someone that can help me be able to, when that person goes home, what am I going to do? Who am I supposed to be talking with? The case manager ends up still being that person. So we had to get very creative and patient. I would definitely have to say patient with the injured worker, being able to understand that where we used to going at a much, I would say going at 100, like a Maserati, we may have to take it a little slow, like a tractor, with making sure, we couldn't push them. You really couldn't push them. And sometimes over the phone, there can be a tendency to try to rush things, so to speak. So there was a lot we had to learn, I would say, regarding effective communication.
But Chiquita, you mentioned even texting your business card to remember the injured worker, just to kind of validate the legitimacy. I thought that was interesting.
I mean, because I have to admit, per HIPAA, there's just certain things that you cannot do. But I would have to say, I find that, this is my business card, and I even would write in my number, a direct number to me. But you'd be amazed at how once they got their business card, it was like the veil dropped. This is someone that I can trust. This is someone that knows what they're doing. And they keep that card. If they don't keep anything else, they were keeping that card because this is my case manager. She's making an effort to help me. I got to keep in contact with her.
Now that's refreshing here, because as a vendor, typically at conferences, I have the opposite experience when I give somebody my card. They typically don't keep it. They don't reach out.
Like me?
That's the beard. That's the beard at this point. Nobody's going to get anything from it. Lisa, managing a team who is managing cases and maybe managing vendors as well.
Right.
is a more multi-layered as opposed to Chiquita kind of going directly there. What was your what was your response to all of that?
Well, thanks, Mark, for that. A couple of things is, first off, we found, Safety National is an excess carrier. So we provide that oversight and working with our self-insureds and our clients and multiple stakeholders. And so what my nurses, I have 4 medical managers that report directly to me. And what we have found is we would ask for, typically in a normal day pre-COVID, is to send out people, nurses like Chiquita, to be our ears and eyes for us, right? To basically go to those doctor's appointments, to get us the medical records that we need, to ensure that we understand the diagnosis, that we are, connecting with the family, that we're connecting with the patient, obviously, and then going from there to make sure we have the right treatment plan in place and that we're maximizing their recovery. With that being said, once COVID came, it did come to a halt a little bit, and we're like, oh no. And we're still thinking in our heads from our desk, oh, well, we'll still send a nurse out. But then we send out Chiquita and she's like, hey, wait a minute, I can't get in. I can't get you those medical records. And we're like, oh, what are we supposed to do? And so at first it was a couple of weeks of like, well, what do we do? So everything kind of halted. It's just like, the virtual visits weren't set up yet. The doctors didn't know how to respond. Nobody knew what to do. And so we're relying on Chiquita to say, what are we supposed to do? And then it's really interesting to hear her perspective of how she navigated that. Texting her business card, kind of relying on those social media platforms and, Zoom calls and WebEx and phone calls and here's my phone number, text me if you need anything, going through that route of building that relationship and rapport with those physicians and patient family, more importantly. And so eventually, I think after a month, we started figuring it out, and the field nurses we were communicating better with the field nurses to say, this is what we can get for you. We'll do our best. We try to connect a lot more with utilization review and case managers that were actually located inside the hospital, where before they often wouldn't speak to us. We were able to break down some of those walls a little bit, and they were more open to speak with us and get us the information that we were looking for. So it was very challenging times, and kudos to Chiquita for all that you do, because when we met before this call today, I was impressed. I was like, wow, I didn't think about that. Texting your business card to them to show this is really who I am, since they cannot visually see you in person. Something to be said for those in-person relationships. We value those so much, and those are so important for our injured workers.
Absolutely. Do you think, you made a good point there, Lisa, about maybe it forced people to be uncomfortable with kind of stepping outside of their maybe normal day-to-day roles and interacting with yourself, right? So
right.
I was at a hospital, I now had to interact with Lisa at Safety National.
Right.
Do you foresee that as a positive change to the industry?
Yes,
Is that
I do.
something? Okay.
I do think go forward, our relationships with case managers that work actually in the hospital, even some of the nursing staff, I think is definitely a positive. I think that is something that we've helped build that relationship and kind of proven ourselves. They kind of know who we are, maybe proven ourselves a little bit that we do care. We're not sitting there paying the bill or telling you we're not going to pay this or pay that. There's more to it, that we really care for these injured workers, and we really want to provide the best care we possibly can.
That's awesome.
So how has working from home made it either easier or harder to get your job done? It's interesting. I read something recently that Wall Street is having a hard time getting people to come back into Manhattan. And Wall Street firms are actually thinking about downsizing the real estate because people are working in their pajamas in New Jersey and not having to go through the 3 hours of commute on trains, planes, and automobiles to get downtown. So, you're kind of in that situation, Chiquita, your field, so you're used to kind of working from your home and so it probably wasn't that big of an adjustment, but still there was an adjustment, right?
Yes.
I would have to say yes. And what I mean is that you had to be able to allow a little bit more time for the fact that because when you would go into the offices, it would be possibly you, the patient, and the doctor. Well, after COVID hit, they only wanted maybe 2 people in the room at the time, maybe at the most an interpreter.
Mhm.
So you did have to allow more time sometimes for an appointment because the doctor's office is going to see, let's be honest, they're going to see the people who are paying first sometimes before they see the case manager. So I would have to say you did have to allow maybe more time for the office visit. I would say that was one of the bigger adjustments for us in the field.
Gotcha. It's interesting you mentioned interpreter, and certainly, you know, there's
Mhm.
multiple languages in work comp and different geography, and we're used to having that interpreter. How
Yeah.
does that work when you're not in the same room? You can't read nonverbal communication.
Yeah.
Interpreter may or may not be
Yeah.
doing a great job. How does that work?
You know what? One of the things that I have to admit, is that I actually spoke with the doctor. And I said, you know what, I definitely understand COVID. I said, but is there any way, because of what all we have going on, that maybe we can have a bigger room, so to speak, that we can meet in?
Yeah.
And that
Okay.
way we are pretty much enough away from each other and we're still wearing a mask. And some of the doctor's offices was like, okay, yeah, that'll work, but why didn't we think of that? But because I understood, number one, there is COVID. We can't ignore that fact. But number two, the issue is that you have 4 people in one, depending on the size of the room. Yeah, that room is crowded.
Sure.
Hmm.
You're not 6 feet apart. So that would be one of the things that I would have to say, Mark, that I did. And it actually turned out to be very effective because now I have like 3 of those patients. Whenever we go to a visit, they always make sure that we have that big room
That's
to be
fantastic.
able, so that all 4 of us can be in a room. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, we learned during our prep meeting that Tim periodically mows his lawn at lunchtime. Lisa, when you're working from home, and you're at home now, I think you mentioned you're going in the office now, 2 or 3 days a week, and it's going to expand. What was it like when you were working from home, when you're managing people that are working from home, that you were all together, prior to that? How did that work from a management standpoint?
So it can be a little bit of a challenge at times. However, I will say that back in my past life, we did work from home. So I came with that experience of how do you manage a team of nurses and keep everyone connected, and to promote that teamwork, and building morale and keeping everyone productive, and how do we help each other out, and I can take that case, blah, blah, so forth. So I did come with that experience. And so I will say it went very smoothly. Everyone's always available anytime. And trust me, I host impromptu meetings and huddles frequently. And I made an effort from a management standpoint. I made an effort to ensure that we were connecting all the time. So we do, I always did the one-on-ones in the past, but I made sure that in addition to that, I was having the huddles, bi-weekly, and then having a meeting on the opposite week, and then having their one-on-one on another week, not to inundate them with meetings, but just to be connected. Or I make an effort just to jabber them and say, hey, how's your day? How's your weekend? Things like that. Whereas when we were in the office, I would walk by their office and say, how you doing today? That sort of thing, where they're not there. We're all in our own 4 walls. So instead, I would just go about it through jabber, or pick up the phone occasionally. Hey, I know you went out of town this weekend. How was you, that I think that goes far, kept in touch, not only professionally about in terms of how they're doing in terms of their workload, but also personally.
Sure.
So it can be a challenge, but I think, I have a great team and they work very hard, and we do really stay connected, regardless of being in the office or not. And productivity is fantastic. So there's no problem there.
That's awesome. And we know Mark's comment about mowing the lawn is a lie, because I live in Nebraska and there's been snow on the ground for the last 6 months.
Yeah, I think somebody sent a note about that.
Yes, Melinda made a comment about that. So thank you, Melinda, for calling Mark out on that. I appreciate it. Backing me up. That's right. It's interesting. I think you mentioned the camaraderie and the the personal relationships and the professional relationships, you know, in the spirit of this podcast, have you noticed the industry as a whole? Have you felt like there's been enough opportunities to connect? You know, working from home, everyone, no one's going to conferences. There are a lot of very good business relationships that benefit the injured workers that are made at these conferences, and new technology, new equipment, new ways of doing business that come from those conferences. Mark Pugh is a common speaker at a lot of conferences nationwide, and so, you know, always talking about new research, new things going on. In your industries or in your experience, has that impacted your day-to-day or your companies at all? Like, what impact have you seen, and do you think that that's, you know, has it been a detriment at all to the injured worker or the industry as a whole? If you have any comments on that?
Yeah, my thoughts on that. I miss the conferences. I miss connecting with all of you and, you know, learning about what's going on in each jurisdiction. I belong to the IABC. We learn about multiple jurisdictions and what's new and the regulators and, you know, the new legislations and you know, we have been able to do virtual, but I feel it's just not the same. That's for me personally. The positive of that is I've been able to invite like some of my nurses to attend because it is virtual. So it does give them the opportunity to participate instead of flying them, you know, across country and hotel and, you know, so dollar wise, it's a savings, you know, and we're able to open it up to others to participate. But on the flip side, I do miss that interaction. I was talking to, you know, Tammy Boyd the other day, and I was like, gosh, are we ever going to get together again? You know, that sort of thing. I do miss that. I think Mark Walls and Kimberly George have done a fantastic job with the Outfront ideas. That's helped a lot. Again, it's allowed us to all still connect in some fashion.
Yep.
You know, to a certain degree, though, I think it's forced us to be more appreciative. I don't know if that's, you know, a hard savings or a soft savings, but it's, if anything, I think it has taught us to be more appreciative and grateful for when we are able to be face to face, because it was so much a norm for us, you know, hey, I need to talk with, talk with Preferred Medical, you know, about an issue. Hey, we can meet for lunch. We can be able to, you know, like, hey, let's brainstorm on some things. And now when you can't do it, you realize just how profitable those face-to-face interactions are. So I would say for me, I'm just more appreciative now. I'm so looking forward to being able to be face-to-face with a lot of people that I've been in the industry with forever. But when you don't see them, you realize just kind of how much, like, wow, we are a family, because workers' comp is its own little niche, you know, but I just think we're more appreciative.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think we've taken a lot for granted. I have taken a lot of things for granted. And, you know, when the rug got pulled out from us a year ago, you know, we realized a lot of the stuff that we took for granted that was just always going to be there, was always going to be done the same way, that was always going to be available and accessible all of a sudden. And I think that's where the mental challenge has been for most people. You know, set aside the concern about contracting COVID and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Just the concept of it's always been done this way. Every day that I've been alive, there has always been the opportunity to go out and see a movie, to go to a sporting event, to go to conferences, to interact with people at dinner, you know, all that kind of, have big birthday parties. When a funeral happens, to be able to have, you know, everybody that cares for that person to be there. And all of a sudden, all of that was not accessible. That's been the biggest mental challenge for everyone. How are y'all dealing, since we're talking about medical management, how are you dealing with that mental aspect, you personally, and maybe those that you're interacting with or managing? How have you been able to manage that concept that everything that used to be standard, status quo, always happened, now it's not there, or it's there in a different format?
Well, so like in terms with my team, you're referring to, and just in, or just in life in general, you mean, I guess, anything?
Wherever you want to take it. Yeah, wherever you want to take it.
So, I mean, I'll tell you, initially it was challenging. For me personally, I'm a I consider myself pretty outgoing. I like to be busy. I
No,
like to go
you don't
out.
say, no. You outgoing? No.
I'm just so quiet. I know. I just sit in the corner, But anyway, so it was tough. Mentally, that was tough on me in the beginning, the first few months. Not, before I would travel at least once a month. And even one of my nurses would joke, say, well, where are you flying to today? And I'd be like, oh, I'm going to, to Kampala, or I'm going, whatever. And so I enjoyed that. So when last year hit, a year from today, when it all started, I didn't realize how much my life was going to stop, and it was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to connect with these people? How am I going to see Tim at Saka or wherever, and it's just, it was a lot. It was mentally a lot for me, but then I tried to flip it to the positive. Okay, I got to stay healthy. I have to still interact with my team as much as I possibly can. We're still remain productive and doing what is best for our organization as a whole. And we still have injured workers. So we have to, move forward and treat them and ensure that they get the optimal outcomes. And then COVID claims start coming in, and those were gut wrenching to read. I mean, really,
yeah.
And you saw it, Chiquita, and I'm really interested to hear your perspective, because you saw more. But once I started reading, then that was the reality of it. Oh my gosh, this is really real. Not that I didn't think it was in the beginning on a year ago from today, but it really hit me hard. And then I was like thankful for my health and thankful for, and I was trying to do as much as I can to help these poor people out and their families, and communicating that to our claims department and working with the office about how can we still stay connected, but yet everybody does need to be working from home and so forth.
I would say one of the primary, I would say mentally more than anything, because for one, schools were out. So you're a parent, I tell people that's the job away from your 8 to 5. So dealing with remote learning, that was, I have to admit, that was a challenge, because you're having to help set up a schedule for them. And at the same time, you're also still having to work a job. So I would say mentally that was a lot. But job wise, as regarding the COVID files, I think the main thing was it was kind of heart-wrenching to see how people couldn't be with their loved ones when they were in the hospital once they got COVID. Mm-hmm. And, the hospital can be kind of isolating as it is, but to not be able to have any family member there, and you're in a hospital for 14 days, no family interaction, the most you can do, and you may not have even be able to do that. You may not have even been able to text them because your phone couldn't be there. If you were in ICU, you don't have your cell phone. You basically are having to interact. A family call the nurse's station, hey, how they're doing. To me, that was the most heart-wrenching part.
Sure.
Was, being able to help them, be able to reassure them, yes, you're getting better, but they're like, I need some support right now. This is a lot. And, not being able to have their family. I think that was more challenging mentally than some of the other things. Yeah. Because as a nurse, you don't like to see anybody suffer.
Yeah.
And you know how important the family is.
And I think, in our world of catastrophic care, right, brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, even people who didn't have COVID couldn't see their families, right? It was just the whole system was impacted. I mean, you have individuals who had a brain injury who were in the hospital for 150 days, hospital, post-acute care combined, and they weren't able to see their family at all during that time. It was just, the whole system was just turned upside down. And it's, to your point, it is heart-wrenching to see some of those stories. And we witness it here on campus every day at QLI. We still don't have family visits. It's tough for families. It's really hard on them. I think one thing, for the medical management side, Mark, you mentioned status quo, and this is just the way everything's been, right? Prior to conferences. How about care, on the care side? I think we talked briefly about telerehab a little bit, or telemedicine. How have you seen that? have you seen it become more widely accepted during COVID? Do you see it continuing to be widely accepted after COVID, or whenever anything can go back? You know, are people going to choose, instead of going to an outpatient facility, if I can see a PT through Zoom, and I live in a rural community, especially for the payer side of things, right? You're paying typically for people to travel from these communities to go get these services.
Yeah.
And now I can give you an iPad, connect you with a, you know, a preferred provider, and we can do that virtually. And a lot of the times outcomes are the same, if not better, because they're participating more because they're doing it in their home, in their own environment. What have you guys seen on that front as far as telerehab?
I would say from the field side, number one, I would have to say we didn't use technology probably as much as we should have been using technology. And number two, being on a computer every day and knowing what to do with that computer is two different things.
Sure.
You know, you find that a lot of people are not as technologically savvy as they think they are. Me, I'm an iPhone teen, you know, and I treat my iPhone like it's a computer. However, most people treat their iPhone like it's a phone. I mean, they text and they listen to music. So we had to become, I would say, more technologically savvy in the field with using Zoom. And then there's HIPAA regulations to it. I mean, if you're going to use Zoom, you need to be in an isolated place. You can't be out in the open where someone else can overhear what you're saying to this patient. So we had to be creative in making sure that we are honoring privacy, we are honoring confidentiality. I would have to say when we continue to use it, I think yes, but the big deal for us is privacy and confidentiality, because you got to maintain that no matter what, and where to use it. You know, so I think that was that would be the main thing for us in the field.
That's a valid point you make, Chiquita. That's very true. I didn't think about that piece, but you're absolutely right. So for us, you know, telemedicine is just skyrocketed, right? I mean, for a while there, that's all we were doing is virtual visits for their doctors and our rehab specialists, and everything was virtual. Once we got over the shock of realizing this is a shutdown and then nobody can be seen, then the doctors became on board after a month or two. Or you probably know better than I, Chiquita, how long did it take for the physicians to really realize they needed to do virtual appointments, would you say? Like, or
you know, it took about 3 weeks, because we had some doctor offices that shut down for a month. So we had surgeries canceled and doctor's visits.
That's what I thought. I thought it took like 3 or 4 weeks. I thought we were hearing that on our end as well. So once we got over that piece, now it's virtual's the way to go. However, this is my thought. So prior to COVID, and kudos to QLI, I did have an injured worker that we did do tele-rehab with at the end and helped her transition back to her job. And they did via, you know, iPads, you know, arrange for interviews and walked her through the process and how to address questions and how to dress for the interview and all that good stuff. And so I did dabble in it a little bit, and thanks to QLI is really what opened my eyes to it. To be honest, that was my first case with tele-rehab, if you will. And then shortly thereafter, we have, you know, COVID, right? So I was like, wow, well, this is, I guess, the way we're going to go. So now that we're past the year mark, I think it's a fine balance for the future. And what I mean by that is we need, you know, there's something to be said. There's a lot of value in for a physician to lay his hands on a patient, to check the range of motion, to watch their gait, you know, when they walk into the office, to look how they transfer from sit to stand position, you know, when they're coming in, to observe their mental well-being. You learn so much by just putting your eyes on a patient, right? And you can tell where their mood is, where their head's at. I mean, that nonverbal says so much. And I think through Zoom, it's very limited. It's just and you definitely can't watch them. I mean, you could try to watch them walk across the floor through Zoom, but most likely the doctor is not going to spend that time, right? So having said that, I think those initial appointments, we still need that in person, even with rehab. And tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, what do you think, Tim? Don't you think those initial appointments are good in person?
You know, not being a clinician, I'm just kind of regurgitating what I've heard, but I have heard to your experience that you mentioned, we've been able to replicate fairly well what you can do in person. Now those initial ones, I think a lot of times, to your point, I could see where there's some value in that. I'm never going to discredit that side of things. But I do think you made a good point of like, there's a balance there. And
there is a balance.
It has been nice to see the industry shift to like, nope, they have to be in person. They have to do this. They have to do this. It was so rigid before, where I do think COVID, I hate that COVID had to happen, but I do think it opened everyone's eyes up to Chiquita's point of technology is extremely beneficial on far more fronts than a lot of people use it for. And telemedicine, telerehab, all of those things are avenues that a lot of people were very hesitant towards. And when I said that, it oftentimes wasn't always the injured worker that was hesitant to it. It was a lot of times the payers or the case managers that are like, well, I don't know about that. And now we're seeing everyone's kind of on the same page. Injured workers are like, yeah, I can do rehab in my house. Sure. Right. I mean, as long as there's the communication, I think to go all the way back to the beginning of our conversation, I think communication has become far more important than it was prior to COVID as well.
Absolutely.
Because,
I was just going to say, we got actually an unexpected benefit too. And believe it or not, with the site, the cases that involve psychologists and psychiatrists.
True.
You would be amazed at the number of people who are okay with doing telepsych visit.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, it's like,
that's unheard of.
We were getting them in sooner, believe it or not. And I have to admit, a number of the psychologists and psychiatrists that I've spoken with has stated that they've got so much more compliant now that the person, they don't have to get off, and they don't even have to get off work now to go. They can make the plans to talk to that psychiatrist or psychologist or their counselor during the lunch break. And it has really increased compliance. So I would say that's an unexpected thing that we anticipated, because sometimes getting people into that psych visit can be challenging, but that has been one unexpected benefit.
Well, there's not the stigma associated with it either. It's like, where are you going? See my shrink. Well, no, I'm just going to make a phone call, and you can do that as well. Absolutely.
Yeah. And to your point, Lisa, I think we're applicable. Obviously, in person is always you're never going to, in a scenario where it has to be in person, you're not going to try to insert tele, right?
That's right. That's right. And it depends on the injured worker. It depends on the situation, the diagnosis. And I think during that convalescent stage, telerehab is the way to go. Telemedicine is the way to go. And those poor, the people that live out in the rural areas, they don't need to travel. We don't need to pay for transportation. They don't need to pay the gas. We don't, that's where it's super beneficial.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I'm interested to see how the industry as a whole adapts, and over the next 12, 18, 24 months of like, I would hate to see it revert back, right? Because I do feel like, to Chiquita's point in the beginning of, sometimes workers' compensation gets a negative connotation. I mean, people don't automatically think happy thoughts when they think of workers' compensation, right? And so it's nice to see that the industry is making changes to benefit the injured worker, which is what we all want to happen, right? I mean, that's the goal of this entire world, is to benefit the injured worker. And so being able to adapt and overcome and change, all for, impacting and making sure that their care is the best that it can be. So.
No, we're definitely made positive strides from the workers' compensation arena. Group health has always been way ahead of us, right? They've always been on the forerunner on, telemedicine and the visits and the virtual visits, and they've been doing that for a while. So it's nice to see work comp come along. It is that good integration.
Well, I think the industry has surprised itself, because I think we have told ourselves over and over and over again that we don't adapt to change. We are slow adopters. We aren't the most innovative people on planet Earth. And I think when heaven and earth changed for everybody, we all figured out how to work from home. We all figured out the concept of Zoom, even though people were hacking Zoom meetings to begin with. But, you know, there were a lot of things, you know, there were probably some shortcuts taken on privacy and confidentiality and HIPAA just to get past stuff. But we learned how to incorporate that kind of stuff. And I think that is a benefit. Granted, none of us would, I think, invite COVID to come to get the benefits that we got from it. But as long as you're in the middle of it, you might as well, you know, make orange out of lemons, right? So, I don't know if y'all got that. So,
I did get it.
yeah. So as we finish things off, Chiquita, I'd like to ask you first, and then Lisa, what is one thing that you learned from the last year that is in your mind not going to be temporary, but it's going to be permanent? It has changed how you do things, how you think about things, what you do. Is there one thing that you, and I know you've probably, you know, taken into account 17,000 different new things, but distill it down into one that you think is really that's good that's come from it that's going to be permanent?
I think for us as work comp case managers, we get it's orthopedic, neuro, physiatrist. Those are the three. Now I think we are going to have to do a better job of networking outside of workers' compensation to be able to get to know specialists that we wouldn't normally deal with, like pulmonologists. Learn what pulmonary rehab is. Revisit, you know, what are the different tests that you would need to do for certain diseases that you don't normally see in workers' comp. But because of COVID, we're going to have to be dealing with those things because we have COVID, we have the long haul. And let's face it, I mean, MMI could still end up being a year away. Mm-hmm. So I would say it's definitely networking outside of workers' comp to get to know those different specialties and be able to figure out how can we create a good working relationship with everyone involved to help the patient.
Perfect. Yeah. I think that's a great permanent change that would benefit everybody, all the stakeholders. Yeah. Totally agree.
Yeah.
I second that. She speaks exactly what I was thinking, the same thing. You're absolutely right. I think it's opened us up to think outside the box, if you will, and to be flexible. We were so rigid before, as you said, ortho, neuro, physiatrist. That's it. Boom. You got to fit in that box. Now it's like, you know, with the long hauler symptoms, I mean, these individuals are struggling with cognitive deficits and or brain fog and all, as well as, you know, dyspnea, difficulty breathing and headaches and fatigue and malaise for months. And so we have to realize, you know, now how do we manage that? And are they really ready to go back to work? And what does that look like for them once they do go back to work? So I think, you know, it's just being more open and flexible in your thought process and just, you know, embracing it all. And then just, you know, it's on a case by case basis. We can't lump everybody in the same box. You know, we have to be open. As to your point, Chiquita, you nailed it perfectly. It's just thinking about, you know, we have these permanent pulmonary issues. We're going to be seeing the pulmonologist. We're paying for medications that we typically didn't pay for before unless there was an inhalation injury or they were exposed to asbestos, which you don't see as much now anymore. But, you know, those were the rare occurrences that you sent them to a pulmonologist or you saw nebulizer treatments and things like that. Now we're seeing it every day, you know, so it's just being open and flexible and just having a better understanding and realizing that each patient is different.
Boy, what a novel concept, huh? Tim, any final comments from you?
No, nothing on my end. I think you guys hit everything. We touched on a lot of the topics we wanted to touch on, and I appreciate your insight. You guys are amazing to listen to. And if you guys don't know Lisa or Chiquita and you see them out on the conference circuit, make sure you connect. I think well, Chiquita, I didn't bring this up last time, but 2 years ago, you were in Nebraska. I think you came and you did a presentation. So that is where we met in person. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. But yes,
yeah, that was cool.
Yeah,
I enjoy it myself.
Good. That's what I like to hear. Lincoln, Nebraska. It's if you haven't been, you should visit. It's okay.
Yeah, really, I liked it. I did. I mean, no, actually, because I like to travel. So I have to admit, that was my first time in Nebraska, and I was regretting not staying an extra day just so I could do some sightseeing. So yeah, you're right. I do plan on going back.
Yeah. Well,
Go when it's
you have
warmer
enough.
though. You gotta
Yeah.
go when it's warmer.
I'll go in the winter.
Well, I will tell you, I've flown into Omaha several times, and it is probably the most secure TSA ever because they've got
Yes.
Cornhusker offensive linemen
Yes.
working that stuff.
It's the best
You're not getting
airport.
past those 6'5", 320 guys to
You're
get to
not.
your
That's
plane
right.
flight.
You better make
Not
sure your
gonna
nail
happen.
clippers
Best
don't have a little
airport.
knife on them. If your nail clippers got that knife, you got to throw it away.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Chiquita. I think
Thank you.
really beneficial conversation.
Thank you.
And I think there was a lot of great stuff in here for those of in the audience that heard, not just, whining about what happened, but,
Yeah.
to account what we have learned and going forward. So really, thank you so much, both of you being involved. For those of y'all in the audience, set your dates for April 15th. It's a little bit different. It's going to be the third Thursday instead of the second Thursday. Our theme will be digital branding, and our guest will be John Mast of Sedgwick and Carl Luna of Risico. So excited about talking about how digital marketing and digital branding works in this kind of virtual age. And two guys that really know their stuff. So we're looking forward to that episode.
Fantastic. Thank you for having us. This was fun. This was a
All
lot of
right.
Thanks
fun.
for joining us. It was a lot of fun.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Y'all have a great week.
Thanks,
All right,
everyone. Take care.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.